Alright, so I just got back from watching Until Dawn, the movie based off of the video game of the same name, which I believe came out 10 years ago. So there you go. Now, I actually have played Until Dawn, the video game, which is rare for me because I do not play horror video games. But this one I played with my friends from college, and I actually had a really good time playing the game with friends. It was a lot of. It's not a game I would play by myself, but with a group of friends, it was a fun experience, and I actually quite enjoyed, surprisingly, the story of the game. So I'm not a mega fan. I have heard and seen that there are fans of the video game that are just adore the game and they can quote it and all this stuff. I've only played the game once, but I quite enjoyed it. Surprisingly for me because I'm a big scaredy cat. So I was interested in the movie. I did lose some interest when I saw that even though the movie is called Until Dawn, it's not really adapting the story from the game. It's doing its own thing, which on one hand makes sense because in the game has multiple endings depending on what you do. You could have it where certain people live and certain people die. You could have it where everybody lives, or if you're sick and twisted, you could have it where everybody dies. So it's kind of hard to adapt that, I guess, because there isn't really a set story. There's lots of different endings. So if you're making a movie, you kind of have to pick which one you want to do, and that might not be everybody's favorite. So I understand why they went in a completely different direction, but unfortunately, the direction they went, in my opinion, was kind of generic and not super interesting. I think this movie has a pretty strong first half. Like it's not amazing or anything in the first half, but it's decently strong. It's got an interesting enough hook where they take the concept of surviving until dawn and they make it where every time the characters in this movie die, the night restarts, kind of like Groundhog Day. But unlike Groundhog Day, every night it's something different trying to kill them, mostly. So they have to adapt to that situation and figuring out why this is happening and all that stuff. That's all the trailer explains, so that's all I'll explain plot wise. But unfortunately, okay, so the good stuff. The first half is strong because they're building in that mystery. You don't know why this is happening. You're excited to see what monster is gonna come next, that sort of stuff. And surprisingly enough, the movie's actually kind of funny in the first half, which the game had a couple of jokes too, so they kind of carried over that humor element. But once the movie starts explaining things get a lot less interesting and a lot more generic. And I found the ending of this movie, especially the last half hour, to be very underwhelming. It stopped being tense, it stopped being scary, and unfortunately, the explanation for why any of this was happening was super underwhelming to me. It almost like it explained what was happening and at the same time did not explain what was happening. It's so weird. So that really let me down. And unfortunately, the characters are very, very cookie cutter. There's barely any depth to the characters at all. And there was a lot more depth to the characters in the video game. Now, I get it. In a video game, it's longer, so you have more time for more character development, but they could have done something instead of just making them so stock stereotype. They're almost the exact same stock stereotype characters from Cabin in the Woods, which is a great horror movie that kind of makes fun of cliches in horror movies. And the reason why the characters in Cabin in the Woods are stock and cliches because the movie's kind of spoofing that idea. This film isn't spoofing that, and they're acting like every character in any horror movie ever. So they're not super interesting, and the plot is not super interesting, and the movie just stops being interesting about 40 minutes into it for me. So a bit of a letdown. I did appreciate there were a couple Until Dawn Easter eggs from the game that were cute, but you know, it's fine. I mean, you could just watch those on YouTube, I guess. They try to keep the themes of the game, sort of the thematic, you know, lesson that the same game had, you know, familial trauma and guilt and that sort of stuff. But besides that, there's not much about this film to really take home. It's just kind of in one ear, out the other, unfortunately, unlike the game. So not really a recommendation from me. If you are a big fan of Until Dawn, you're probably going to watch it anyway. But if you haven't played the game, you know nothing about this, I don't really think this movie is worth your time. If you're having a bunch of friends over for like a Halloween horror movie marathon where you're putting on, you know, kind of meh horror movies in the background while you're doing other things, like playing games or something, I don't know. This is fine for that, but honestly, unfortunately, I don't really think this movie is worth anybody's time, really, unless you are a huge Until Dawn fan and you just kind of have to see what the movie version is like. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Until Dawn.